Annandale Legends podcast. Tonight I have the 1978 Annandale Adams High School national champions football team. Guys that I watched when I was a little guy. Annandale had such a unbelievable football program, and every team that they had was supposed to win the whole thing. There was a lot of pressure on these guys. But I want to go back quickly to 1978. These are the post-Watergate years, post-Vietnam years. So it's Jimmy Carter's president. It's a time of relative peace, but it's also a time of inflation, high gas prices. Disco is the latest craze, and the wide lapels are out, but no more platform shoes and bell bottoms. So it was a really interesting time. Things were changing really fast. So let me introduce the team and let them tell you a little briefly about themselves, like what neighborhood they grew up in, and what position they played, and maybe quickly what team they played for, like youth program growing up.
Good evening, fellas. My name's Ron Renzi. I grew up in North Springfield, Virginia. It was interesting because with the tradition we have at Annandale, we also had it through Boys Club, and Clarke and I played together, and we played at Annandale. And then we went on to play for the YMCA Buckskins, which that group of kids actually went through youth football on into high school. So that was nice. We had a lot of experience together and played together prior.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Ron. Well, Mike, why don't you go next?
Yeah, I'm Mike Gullette. I played defensive back and did some kicking and kick returning that year. I actually was in the Braddock Road youth programs back then, which was more aligned outside the Beltway. So we played a lot with guys who either went to Woodson, Robinson, Lake Braddock, and we were always, or at least I was always jealous of you guys, Ron and Greg, because weren't you guys part of the team that eventually would play in the Thanksgiving Beltway Super Bowl or something like that?
It's called the Marriott Super Bowl. You're right.
The Marriott Super Bowl.
Yeah,
right.
Ron, correct me if I'm wrong. Ron, correct me, but I think we won that.
Yeah, yes, we did. As a matter of fact, Greg and I played in that game. We won that game. My father coached that team.
Yeah.
So this was broadcast on TV every Thanksgiving or what have you, right?
Yeah, I played in that years later on a Braddock Road team as well. We played a team from Suitland, Maryland, or something like that. It was pretty cool. Why don't we go to Mark Cox next? Now, Mark, I always associated you with Todd Kirtley, and I think Mark Krasinski or whatever from Robinson, because I went to Robinson, and you were around the same time as those guys, right?
I was 3 years after Todd, I believe.
Okay.
But I did have the opportunity to play against Todd with the year that I think they went to states.
Okay.
And we beat them.
Oh.
And that was, you guys probably remember, Warren got hurt, and I had no idea what was going on. I was a freshman, had to come into the game, play Robinson.
Wow.
Yeah, that was probably a turning point in the current or in the next year, because we have a freshman playing, and that was one heck of a game. We could talk for 2 hours about that.
Wow, that's a lot. So Mark, where did you play growing up? I know you're a longtime coach out in Loudoun County.
Prince William County. I grew up in Annandale, and I also played for the YMCA Buckskins as well.
Okay, great.
There's a lot of people played for the Buckskins back then.
Sounds like we had a great team.
We did. Well, I was, a few years behind these guys, but they did a good job with the kids there.
Great. Yeah. Well, thanks, Greg. Clarke, why don't you go next?
I was running back at Annandale, but grew up right where Annandale Road and Hummer meet, so not too far from Mark. And as Ronnie mentioned, played with him with the Annandale Bulldogs, which was kind of their select team. And then his father actually helped found the YMCA Travel League, where we played all through Maryland, as you're probably aware, and played with Ronnie there. So
yeah, great
times.
Well, thanks. Well, Phil, I also associate you with soccer, as a goalie for some reason. I think I'm good friends with Keith Leonard, as you may know, and your name has come up quite a few times about soccer. So why don't you go next?
Yeah, so Phil Denfeld. I played wide receiver, a little tight end, and I kicked and punted. And I actually grew up in the Annandale Boys Club system. I only played 2 years of football when I was 7 and 8 years old, and then switched over to soccer. And the next time I went out for football was as a sophomore at Annandale. So I remember Mike, and because Mike and I went to all the way through elementary school and everything. So I always knew about those guys playing in the Braddock Road, youth football and stuff. But I was very fortunate to play on a really good soccer team and traveled all over the world. So won a national championship. So football really wasn't my sport until I got to Annandale.
Well, yeah, it seems like it happens more in football than most sports. Sometimes I wonder whether it's even worth playing youth football because you don't even know who's going to be big enough to be really a factor, especially today. So why don't we go with Jim Hatch is next. I know, well, Jim, you've never looked better. You look great there today.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Jim, you haven't gained any weight or anything.
Yeah, well, that's when they started talking weight. Notice I left my camera black. That's all right. So yeah, my father was career Marine Corps, and like some of these guys, my father grew up actually played ball in a little town called Live Oak, Florida. Went on to play for the Florida Gators.
Wow.
So I always grew up with a love of the game. We actually lived in London, England. And a family that came to London made the comment that if you're going back to Northern Virginia, Bob Hardage, Annandale football, and Fairfax County schools, it's a no-lose situation. You'll do, it's the school you want to go to. So I was one of those kids that came in as a transplant my sophomore year and went on to play running back as well. But I was very close to being a pulling guard. So, yeah.
Well, thanks, Jim. Well, let's talk a little bit about football. As you guys know, football's in trouble now. I mean, we just had a great playoff season for the NFL, but generally participation is way down. The game is seen as too violent. So sometimes you wonder if football's past its peak. But when you guys were coming of age in the early 70s, playing youth league and then playing high school, football was becoming the national pastime, taken away from baseball. It was a great time to be a football fan in DC. George Allen had taken over from Vince Lombardi, and the Redskins were finally winners for the first time in many generations. Great veteran teams. I mean, football was king here. It was a birth of Monday Night Football. So it was really a great time to get into football. It's so different than things are now. And so you guys were, it was perfect timing. So what do you guys remember about, playing football in the 1970s and even, as you entered high school? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Sure.
Some of the biggest things I remember about football back then were the ingredients that it took to be successful. And I think as football, as you've said, the evolution of the game and the popularity of the game, the violence of the game has changed, and it's become, in my opinion, more entertainment. But back then, the key ingredients through coaches and different, as you mentioned earlier, introducing us, all the experience we had as youth all the way up through high school and then through wherever else we played, the ingredients were all similar, and it was built on character. That was the number one ingredient. And football was used to build men at that time. And I think that's some of the best memories I have, and some of the strongest, I think some of the biggest impact that had on me personally were those factors as we went through those sports. And some of the biggest things I remember was how they constantly pushed that, and they constantly made us uphold ourselves to a higher standard at that time.
Yeah, that's great, Ron.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to try it?
Mark, I want to hear your perspective because you played and then you coached for many, many years. So you're probably very familiar. I remember I went and visited you one time and you were telling me how it was so different than it was when we were playing. I'm just curious your perspective on that, because you've seen an evolution probably in a change in not only the way the game is played, but also how you had to treat the kids and what the parents were like and all that kind of stuff.
It is total different game now. And that's one reason why I retired. But, the kids, the parents, the schools. I mean, when we played on Friday nights, everybody was there. Nowadays, you go to a high school football game, unless it's a rivalry, you're getting 200 people to watch. And it has struggled. They have struggled with it. But it's the kids. When we played for Bob Hardage and we're at Annandale, he always preached being responsible, doing your job, do the little things, and then big things will happen. And I can probably speak for everybody in the picture that we've kind of all lived our life like that. So we learned lessons. Football taught us lessons in life. nowadays the kids are the one teaching the coaches and everybody else what's going on.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. So,
Yeah, I actually volunteered, coached for like 4 or 5 years here at local high school, and I was envisioning being able to have it be like it was back then, but just like Mark said, it's just not the same. You know, if you got on a kid too much, he just quit. They just didn't care.
Or go to another school.
Yeah. Oh, transfer all the time, thinking they were going to get a better situation over there. We had that. We had a lot of kids leave.
It's not a whole lot of pride in your high school now and
Yeah.
playing with your buddies.
Yeah.
You know, Julian, another big difference, and it's interesting to hear Mark's perspective on this, you know, nowadays and how things have changed. When we think back to our games, Mike and I were talking about this before, it's like the whole community would come out, not just guys with your parents in the stands and your siblings. You had people that hadn't had kids there at all playing for Annandale, and they're in the stands, filling the stands. It was a community event. It was all, you know, it all came together on those Friday nights, and it was absolutely amazing the turnout we would get.
Yeah, heck, my parents bought season tickets at Annandale for years after I. They just went to enjoy it, you know?
yeah.
You know, there was a point that was made with the coaching. Dick Adams, who was a head coach after Hardage, Reg Wayland was one of the head coaches in the youth leagues, Rob Slahatka, and I was the third coach. And we had some other assistant coaches. But Reg always made the case for, I'll deal with the football practice, Hatch, you deal with the parents. When we would go through some of the stuff that we went through, one of the observations that one of the coaches had shared was, it used to be you could tell kids, run through that wall. And kids instinctively would do what the coach said and do it. And now it's a question to go, well, why do you want me to run through that wall, coach? I don't think I want to run through that wall, coach. My mom said I don't have to run through that wall, coach. And it was just a different way that when you see parents on the sidelines, they are much more interactive of coming up and asking, why isn't my son playing this position? I don't think my son needs to be there. So there's definitely a different approach. Whereas I think our parents, we'd have been mortified if our parents went up to a coach afterwards, other to say, thank you, coach, good practice, and take you home. And that was it. So definitely a different way at which I think parents feel as if they need to be involved at different levels. And that's definitely different than our generation growing up.
Heck, when Ronnie's dad was our coach, at the end of practice, he'd send us off running. And then it seemed like they forgot about us because we kept running. You know, Ronnie and I look at each other and like, do they know we're still out here? You know, it's getting dark and we're still going in circles around this huge field. And nobody ever questioned the coach. Definitely nobody questioned Ron's dad. But I mean, going through high school, anything the coaches told us, there was never a question. Like Jim said, you go through that wall, you go through the wall. There's not a question. You're going to run for 10 minutes. You're going to run for 20 minutes. You're going to run for 30 minutes. There's not a question. You just did it.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting, and I'm sure Coach Mark will have something to say about this, is at least with football today, the best players do stay at the public school to play football as long as their school is good. In basketball, you know, a lot of the best players, they leave. They go to private schools. They go to Paul VI, they go to O'Connell, they go downtown. The basketball coaches I've talked to, and we still have a lot of good basketball players in the public schools, but a lot of the coaches I talk to say they love when their kids play football and basketball because they have a better chance of keeping them at the public school than if they just play basketball.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That's true. And, you know, and you can't, I try to tell the kids that play multiple sports. And I think Coach Hardage, he was a baseball coach. He told us he wanted us all to do, all of us did do something else, but because the colleges were looking for athletes. Nowadays, the kids specialize year round in one sport, but you'd be surprised when they see an athlete. Like we have a kid playing at the school I'm at now, Battlefield, who has been offered by some pretty good schools. They come watch his basketball games and they see just how athletic he is.
Mm.
And, you know, nowadays kids just, and the parents pay for it too. They specialize in one sport and they, which is one reason why they lose the pride in their school. If we lost to somebody in football, we couldn't wait to play them in basketball or baseball.
yeah.
And that's just the way it was.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about Annandale. I was, talking about 1978 before, and the movie that year was Grease. And, you can't get a more all-American school, the Annandale High School. I think it was called the All-American City at one point. Ironically enough, the other big movie that year was Heaven Can Wait, a great football movie. But and what a special place it was for you guys when you're entering high school.
Well, Phil and I can kind of attest to. We hated Annandale when we were growing up. We actually were. We grew up in the Wakefield Chapel area, which was outside the Beltway, and went to W.T. Woodson until about, I think, around the class of '74 or something like that. Or
when our 7th grade year, when we went to Poe instead of Frost, which is adjacent to Woodson. So 2 years before high school, I had a brother who went to Frost, and then his freshman year was Annandale. And oh my God, because I had a brother and a sister graduate from Woodson. So I grew up going to Woodson. I'm in a Woodson yearbook at a football game in a picture because I went there all the time. I pictured myself playing at Woodson. And then when I found out I had to go to Annandale, I did not want to go there. I remember watching Mike Lucido, who was the running back for Annandale, play against Woodson, against Mel Collins. And I was always, go Woodson. But and I didn't really even realize the storied history that Annandale football actually had, because I just never considered even ever going there.
Well, my older brother, Greg, he graduated from Woodson in '73, played football, ran track. I'm pretty sure virtually every day for 3 years, he talked about beating Annandale. It was that bad. He would talk specifically about Mike Lucy back then and such. And I mean, that was, I'm not sure if we ever could say that we had rivals, but we were their rival. We were absolutely their rival. We had a big target on our backs.
Right.
Well, we're the opposite story. My family, my dad moved to where I grew up. When I was 4, so I could play Annandale football. He was a Texan, loved football, moved us to where we grew up to play football at Annandale.
I was from Tennessee, and we moved there for Annandale too.
I think what I want to jump in. When you look at what you said, growing up in Annandale, to me, Annandale High School had a culture. That high school had a culture, and the culture built around football. And that culture, believe it or not, started out in the neighborhoods. It started out in the communities. It was bigger than the school. When who was just talking, when you would go to an Annandale High School football game as a youngster, the players, the coaches, you would play little football games in the baseball field next to the football field while the game was going on, and you vision yourself like some little kids vision themselves playing in the NFL or Super Bowl. You vision yourself playing at Annandale when you were a youngster at that time. And growing up in that culture and that expectation, as you mentioned, it was a different way of thinking back then. But and yeah, it's different now, but there's still a lot of room now too. Football's still a great game. We can talk about that as we go. But at that time, the expectation and the standard was set very high. And there was pressure to perform, and there was an expectation, and there was an obligation if you played. Yeah. And those are some of the good things, and they were very, very healthy back then. And as I mentioned, we can talk as you ask questions, but to me, it started in the neighborhood. It started in the community. It started with the men, women, kids, boys, girls, teachers, businesses, and all through the community. People were aware of that high school. They were aware of that football program, and they were aware of what you were expected, how you expected, what Mark said, to act, but also the level of play, how you were expected to perform. There was a burden to perform, but you accepted that, and it made you excel. And that's important to me growing up in that area.
I was looking up some of the records and such, of the Virginia State champions until from about 1920 till I think it was 1956. Northern Virginia there was no Northern Virginia team that ever won the state championship. W&L did that year, and they also won it in 1960. Until then, the only thereafter, Annandale won it in 65, won it in 67, then TC Williams, and then Annandale again before us. So, we were the only team actually, and between 65 and I think 68, Annandale lost one game. They tied.
Give some
maybe
stats,
one.
Mikey. Give them some stats, man.
Hey, man,
There
yeah.
you go. Stat him
But
up a little
so
bit.
we were kind of, this was Northern Virginia football,
Yeah.
right? And that's why we.
Talking again about the Annandale and the culture, I saw a picture of Pat Toomey, former Dallas Cowboy player who played at Edison in the 60s. He was a 66 grad. There's a picture of him getting tackled for a safety at Annandale High School, and it's in the yearbook. And you can see there's probably about 5,000 or 6,000 fans there. I mean, there are people all even standing near the end zone, whereas usually at a high school football stadium you're between the 20s or the 30s. I mean, there's people all over the place. The culture was for football was just rabid.
Right.
Well,
we always had 5,000 at least at our games.
Yeah.
Well, and Julian,
ahead,
I'll talk on something just real quick if I can. Based on my son going to Annandale, Reuben Weaver and I reconnected. Reuben was an all-Met center for us that has since passed away. As a labor of love, Reuben went and got microfiche that he was able to go in and collect every article that he could find on Annandale, starting from when the school was first founded, and then found articles that talked about how the coach decided on the red and white colors. They didn't have lights when the games first started. They had to play at Fairfax. The interesting part is these names that all of us have heard, because one of the things that we'll be talking about, I'm sure, is when you got your red shorts and you knew you were in the varsity locker room. The point is, when you got your number, it was very clear. Ooh, you got Donnie Albert's number, or ooh, you got Von Bulowitz's number, or Sonny Utz's number. I mean, these were some of the guys that historically we had heard the legends of these guys, whether it was Ed Henry or Bob Hardage. And then invariably, when we mentioned someone like Sonny Utz, he would come to one of our practices. And we knew that because Coach Hardage bought his car from Sonny Utz, who I think went on and played at the Dallas Cowboys. He was an All-American, which was unheard of for people in Annandale to, we've always said we were never the best players. We had to play better as a team. And it was the teams that we heard about over the years. But point being, when he would show up, Coach Hardage would typically stop practice and say, see that guy over there? He's one of the best running backs that ever played here. So that tradition piece for all of us, and I say that because not growing up here, I didn't really know much about it until afterwards you started to hear more and more. And then Reuben did this book, which is about 3 phone books thick, of just the first 25 years of Annandale history, and every game that's ever been played is on that, Xerox copies in this notebook. So, it kind of gives us all chills for those of us that follow the program, because, we're there based on the legacy that they brought to the Annandale program.
Yeah.
and I have to.
Someone else want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick, I think Ronnie kind of mentioned it too. The cool thing about the culture that we had on the football team of discipline and character, and, that was stressed to us all throughout. Coach Hardage was he was a great coach, and he was tough, but he was fair. But I will tell you that I think it permeated the school. We had this, this winning attitude and this kind of successful attitude that I think everybody in the school, when we won a football game, I think everybody felt like we won, the other students. And there was such a connection. And I think that drove the success that we had, with a school culture as well as a team culture.
Yeah, let me jump on that real quick. And I'm going to go a little bit on a side note on you here, but I like to do that.
That's
What
okay.
Phil just said, I coached 1 year of high school football here in Loudoun County. And we won 9 games. And it was interesting as I would talk to the coaches, just what he just said, I would reiterate to them that and Mark knows this from coaching, and it's unfortunate. It's not a bad thing, but it's a resource that these schools have right now. And that is the football program. And what they have to realize is that what he just said, a successful program, and when I say success, I'm talking about in many aspects of success, how it impacts the school and how it impacts the community. And a great football program will drive the school, and that will give it an identity and a foundation. And I will tell you this, and I say this sarcastically, but it's the truth, it'll affect the price of real estate in that area. The right football program. People think I'm crazy when I'm saying, but it's true. That's what the right program can do. And it's still available today.
Yeah.
It's still available today. It's a great resource for these schools. It's a great resource for the kids in the community. It's just different now. And we got to evolve and adapt. And there's room. We got to be successful at the way it is now, which is very doable. It's very doable.
It's like college applications when a team wins a national championship or plays well in football or basketball now. The college gets a lot more. That didn't really happen 30, 40 years ago. Kids want to go to those winning schools now.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll do that. It'll have that effect.
Yeah.
Hey, Ronnie, I think you can attest to this. Everybody always asks, hey, did Annandale recruit? Hey, did you guys recruit? We're like, no, we don't recruit. But what did happen, and Jim Hatch alluded to it, and I know Ronnie knows it, when military families were moving to the DC area, their fathers, one of their sons played for a top-notch school, top-notch coaches. They said, they'd ask around, hey, where do they go? The answer was always invariably Annandale. So we had always an influx of new athletes coming in that were military. So that again, like you said, it just brought people to the area, brought quality people.
Yeah.
100%. He's 100% on point.
Yeah. Well, part of the culture is going to be obviously set by the coaches that are there. And you guys had wonderful coaches. One of the first great coach, at least that I know of, was Ed Henry. Ed coached at Robinson when I was there. And like Coach Hardage, his daughters went to Robinson as well. I knew them. And then I have a picture of Ed Henry coaching and Coach Hardage next to him. I had no idea they coached together. So I guess at some point, Henry must have left and gone to Marshall. You know, he's featured in the movie, Remember the Titans.
Mm-hmm.
So what was Coach Henry's, when was he at Annandale? And what was the transition when Coach Hardage took over and became the head coach there?
Julian, let me jump for 1 second, just because I think this is important. He was the head coach. Coach Henry was the head coach at Fort Hunt when Coach Hardage was a player at Fort Hunt.
Oh, is that right?
Hardage then went down to William and Mary as the quarterback. And it was Coach Secules that he met there, if I recall, that Coach Secules beat him out and was the #1 quarterback coach. When Hardage left William and Mary, Ed Henry was now at Annandale. And Hardage then came there as his assistant coach. And when Ed Henry left to go to Marshall, or he may have gone to another school before that, but when he left to go, that's when Hardage became the head coach at Annandale.
Okay.
The 1965 Annandale team that won state that year was Ed Henry's team, I believe. And then I think Hardage took over in 66, something like that.
I think you're right, Mike.
That's awesome.
So let's talk a little bit about Coach
Hardage.
Hardage.
When I was there, kind of.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's talk about Coach Hardage. I know we've already referred to him. You guys have already quoted some of his ways to live your life as things that you've taken through your own lives. What kind of coach was he? Was he fair? Always fair? Was he tough?
Oh yeah.
I think all football coaches at that time were tough. But let's talk about Coach Hardage.
Let me start, because I want to start at the beginning. Coach Hardage, and we throw this word around a lot nowadays, but it's the truth. Coach Hardage had a culture, and he held you accountable to that culture. And in any organization, you need leadership. And there's a lot of ways, there's a lot of leadership that goes around. But in order to lead correctly on a football team, the coaches lead, the head coach is #1, but the players have to lead. There has to be leadership amongst the players. And what Coach Hardage did so well, he was a great psychologist, he's a great football coach, very, very, very great football mind, real simple mind. Executionally, he was fantastic. But what he did was he had a culture and he held us accountable to it. He drove that culture. And then I think from a leadership standpoint, we were leaders. All of us guys on this panel I feel did a decent job of leading ourselves and the people around us. And he put that on us, in my opinion. And that to me is the beginning of who he was, in my opinion. So you guys take it from there. But that to me is the beginning point for me and my definition of what I think of Coach Hardage.
I'm going to have to agree with you, Ron, and I'll take your point for accountability a step further. I don't know if it's done at every school this way, but each of us, Julian, was graded on each and every play we participated on the field. And we came in the day after the game, coaches had already been to the films, your grades were posted on the door. Everybody knew exactly what your scores were.
Wow.
How are
You were
yours?
held accountable for everything, every
Yeah,
single play.
Talk
How
about
were your
accountability. Talk about accountability. When I was at Coach Cloud's, Everett Cloud, he was an assistant coach. He was a defensive coordinator. He just died about a year ago. And at the funeral, we saw a few of us saw Cordell Gill. Cordell Gill, another all-star coach. He was, I think, in around 63 or 65. The player of the year in the Washington Post, went to Indiana, eventually, and, all Big Ten, went to the Rose Bowl, played against O.J. Simpson there and such. Yeah. But he was saying, he was talking about the level of accountability that Coach Hardage held to the coaches himself, and how, how he pressed the coaches, on our mistakes, things like that. So that's one thing that I remember too, is that, I don't know, we were maybe a freshman or sophomore. The seniors gave Coach Hardage a going away present of a hat with a string on it that was about 15 feet, because Coach during the practices used to throw his hat so many times because when we mess up, that they say, okay, instead of they could just reel the hat back in.
Well, I mean, Ronnie kind of alluded to, he had a psychological way about him that you didn't really even realize what was happening to you, but he had a way of pulling it out of you. And because of the rules and the discipline and stuff that he instilled in the team and holding us all accountable, we really held each other accountable. And it was maybe a little bit of fear because, they didn't take any crap. I mean, if we screwed up, we paid for it. We'd run hundreds, or we'd, whatever he did. There was, back then, it was, okay, you're not going to get any water for the next half an hour. I mean, we just practice in the hot heat, and too bad, tough it up. But one particular instance I want to bring up, because I think it's part of that mind game mentality. It was during that 78 year, we're undefeated. And I don't remember what game it was. It was probably closer towards the end of the season, maybe even in the playoffs. But we come to one Friday practice, and in Thursday practices, maybe it was Friday because maybe it was a weekend game. But the point is, you'd get your red shorts on. You had to have a clean white T-shirt, and we got dressed up, and it was just helmets and that. And we all show up on the field. He'd just say, line up in twos. And we had to carry our helmets and an outside hip. And we just started walking in this two-line snake, if you will. We walked out past the school, past the parking lot, and turned into this park that's at the entrance to Annandale called Ossian Hall Park, and started walking through the woods. And we couldn't say a word. There was no jabbering and talking or joking. It was complete silence. And we're walking and walking along. I can remember just kind of looking at the person next to me and just kind of going, this is freaking weird. Like, what is he doing? And we walked and walked and walked, and we came to this little amphitheater with, cut off tree stumps and stuff as seats. And we sat around, and I can't hardly remember, and some of you guys might. I think he said about 3 words. And then we just kind of sat there, and then maybe some of the captains and so forth, we talked, but that was practice that day. It was just a mind game to just kind of get us to focus in. Do any of you guys have recollections or anything else?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll mention a couple. For me, one of them was that I remember recording and talking to him afterwards and asked about different players and different things. And he said, as a coach, your mindset is to either pat them on the back or kick them in the ass. And he said, good coaches have the ability to know how to do that. But then he went very quickly to say, let me tell you the one where I screwed up. And he went on to talk about it. I don't know if it was Rob Anderson. I know it was a quarterback that he basically jumped this kid, and the kid literally took off his shoulder pads and walked off the field. But the next year, Hardage stayed on him, and the kid came out and played, and Hardage knew he needed to pat him on the back. And he said, it's rare in life you ever get a second chance. This kid believed enough that he came back. The second one I want to mention was probably the one that I share with people that ask about, you went to Annandale, Hardage this, Hardage that. And I go, well, here's a mental piece that was new to me being the new kid my sophomore year. Jefferson High School got a new coach, and he would blow a foghorn. We got word, would blow a foghorn in between class, and the whole school would yell, beat Annandale. So fast forward that year, because they did beat us that game. I remember parents getting on the bus, better luck next time, boys, and the whole school was going crazy as we sat quietly on the bus knowing this is a big deal. The school went on at Jefferson, and I think put that number of the score of the game on the outside of their yearbook. That's how much it meant to them. That said, we go to 7 o'clock in the morning in the hot box to watch films, and all of us are in there. Hardage walked in last, walked over, put on the reel, and of course it's tape, so you hear the click, 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 click of the reel going through as he's forwarding him, hitting backwards. No one's talking, complete and utter darkness. He gets up, changes the reel at half, sits back down, click, 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 going backwards and forwards. He stands up at the end of it, and he turned on the light. The whole time the film had been running through the projector, he never turned on the lamp. So for 3 hours, we sat in total darkness, and Hardage stood up in front of us and said, anybody want to see any more? And needless to say, nobody said a word. And then he went in this speech to say, I don't like any of you. You smell bad. You stink. You stunk up the field last night. And based on that, that's not Annandale football. I saw the film last night. No one will ever see this film again. It was that bad. But he said, I love each of you if you come out on Monday. But when you come out, know that I need 11 players that will play football. That's all I need. I just need 11. And we went into Monday practice with Oklahoma drills, guys wanting to kill each other. The only two he pulled out, if I recall, was Vinny Dunn, who went on to be FBI Academy, and Danny Malm. And before practice started, he said, these two gentlemen I know have the heart of a lion and want to play. So these two have positions, but now let's find who else wants to play. So he was always in our head of making sure we were making, we knew where the bar was set.
Coach Mark, since you coach a long time, there's some of these methods where they work today, but also I really want to know from you I'm sure the game was much more basic back then. It's more complicated in terms of offense, the passing game especially. What of Hardage did you use in terms of X's and O's in your coaching career?
You'd be surprised that the 31 years I did coach, I still had Annandale plays.
Is that right? Yeah.
And everybody gets excited with the spread offenses and the no huddle, but then they always come back and say, you got to teach the fundamentals, and be disciplined, which is what we learned. So it didn't matter what we ran, but I stuck with the stuff that I learned and that I knew worked. And it was more about discipline, doing it right. It doesn't matter what they play on defense. You do what you're supposed to do on offense. And at practices, we run plays over and over and over till we got it right.
Yeah.
And that was always my philosophy as a coach. It doesn't matter what they do. We do what we're coached to do. We're going to be okay.
It's so funny you said that, because I did a podcast with Mark Bendorf, longtime Robinson coach. He was at Mount Vernon. He's been around. He played at Marshall, and I hadn't kept up with football because my kids don't play. But we ran a wing T when I played, so I just figured it was obsolete. So we were talking during this podcast, and I asked him, what offense did you run? Wing T. So I mean, it was years later they were still doing Ed Henry's. He was basically running Ed Henry's wing T in 2010. So
Julian, funny. Hardage was also talking about his style. He was a prep guy. So, and you hear that a lot, but he was a prep guy. He was, every period, every practice, and I'm sure everybody knows, and Mark coaching and the rest of the people who had experience. So he was total prep all the time. No one was more prepared than him, and he prepared the team that way. But he was also the class act thing came through in his coaching. Like, he was big on making sure you did it with class. He wanted you to physically dominate your opponent. He wanted you to whoop your opponent, but you had to do it with class. You had to do it with class. And he was big on that. And that was part of the accountability and the culture thing we keep referring to. So he was super prepared and real physical, real dominant, but you had to have class all along the way, which for some of us was a little more difficult than others, but he drew it out of us.
Well, you
Hey,
know,
Ron, let me, I want
to
to jump in real quick.
No.
Because I coached a lot,
Yeah.
I got complimented so many times after we beat somebody and we did not celebrate in the middle of their field.
Yeah.
Coach Hardage didn't like to see anybody celebrating.
Yeah, he put that in you.
Wait to celebrate when you get back to school. And I got compliments from a lot of coaches and ADs saying, we appreciate you, you guys shake hands, and it was respectable, and they appreciated that. And that's something I learned from Coach Hardage.
Definitely.
Well, and Mark, I'll bring up what you said with the plays, right? So we're in a practice, and Tim Krieber, we run the play. Tim Krieber comes back. He's a guard. And he goes, Coach, they heard the play. They heard the play. He goes, oh, they did? Okay, tell you what, same play on 2, same play on 2. So we get up to run the play. You hear Mark, down, set. Coach Hardage runs over right in front of Tim Krieber on the defensive side and says, they're running the ball right here. They're running the ball right here. And then he ran off the field. We run the play. He brings us all back and says, let me show you how the play works. He grabbed Tim. You block down. You hit here. You release to this. Receiver goes downfield. He said, gentlemen, every play is designed to score a touchdown. Don't care what we run. We may only run 2 to 3 plays. And half these guys know, or all these guys know, there were certain games where we only ran 2 or 3 plays. And his point was, they just have to stop it. Run the play. And that was
Mike,
that life lesson.
Yeah. Mike can tell you this. How many defenses did we run?
Just Oklahoma 5-4. We had the goal line.
That's it. Line up, man. I mean, wow. Huh? Come on.
when I went to college, I remember sitting in my first meeting in college football, and we started looking at game film, and the coach is saying, "What defense is this? What defense is this? What's the coverage?" And I'm like, "We didn't see that in high school. You know, he just lined up, and they were always there. You know, it was cover three, whatever."
Yeah.
And it was like that was an education on the advancement of football from high school to college. But I'll tell you, one of the stories I always share with people: state championship game, we blocked the field goal that would have sealed the game for Highland Springs. We take over the ball, and Jim, you can attest to that because you were the guy running the freaking football. We ran the same running play all the way down the field until we got down within, maybe the 15-yard line. But we just kept running the same play. We're getting 6-8 yards every time. So we just call it again, and we just pounded away. So, yeah, he was a big proponent of that. And the other thing that I think was, Coach Hardage had so much class that there were many games that we could have scored 50, 60 points. But there were many games where we were out at halftime. Most of the starting offense and a lot of the defense didn't play a lot of the second half. I can remember many games sitting on the sideline just wanted to get in there because it was fun. But he didn't want to run the score up on anybody. I think if you look back, I think 31 points was the highest number of points we scored in a game that year. And it could have been a lot higher, but it wasn't important to him. If we were winning the game, we won the game.
Well, I know we're all hitting on a lot of different things. The accountability piece too. When we showed up to start practice, there was a depth chart, and your name was on a depth chart, and it would change at lunch. And Hardage hand typed all of that you'd come up and see where you were, and then you'd go out to the practice. The only reason I bring that up is that regiment that Ronnie was talking about. When we got to Monday practice, we always knew Monday and Tuesday were hellish practices. Wednesday, depending on who we played or who was hurt, could be a little bit lighter. But that Monday, he would line us all up, and then he would walk around and say, my name is Billy Smith. I am an all-met 260-pound, defensive tackle, and I'm going to kick your butt. And he would point to the offensive tackle and make the case for, it's your job to block me. And if you can't do it, he'd point to the second string guy and go, then I'm putting in Steckbeck because Steckbeck's going to do it. And that was a big part of how he started the week, not worrying about 2 or 3 weeks down the road, but each week who the players were that let us know he'd watched films, he knew who their players were, and this was the strategy of what we were going to do to have a week practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember against GW Danville, I think it was the state semis. They had I don't know.
40.
Big, huge defensive lineman.
Yeah, 40.
Yeah, and everybody was like, he was just blowing through people on film, and Hardage just basically challenged us, said, we got to block him. He's just another guy. We got to block him. And, one of the famous stories for me also is in the state championship game, we were losing at halftime, and Highland Springs had pretty much taken it to us. We hadn't done much of anything. And he came into the locker room at halftime and he said, can we block him? And of course, everyone said, well, yeah, we can block him. Can we tackle him? Yeah, we can tackle him. And that was basically the halftime speech to just let us know this is just football, guys. You just do the things that you need to do and you can win. And, I don't remember this, a lot of yelling and screaming and a lot of changing of this and that, the other. It was just, this is football. Do the things you've done all year long and you can be successful. And I know for me personally, I walked out in the second half confident that we could win the game. And I never went into a game that whole year where I didn't think we were going to win.
Yeah, I think that goes for all of us.
Yeah, the big pep talk that he would give, he gave every game, that speech that he did that basically just runs through the rules of football and what a person is supposed to do.
Yeah.
That was almost haunting when every time I heard that. Really, and it ends with what be rough and ready at all times.
Yeah, and then the whole team would yell, champions don't choke.
Yeah, be rough and ready at all times. Poise, gentlemen, and champions don't choke. And then the first time anybody hears that, I mean, they just kind of fall on their backs because it's just.
I had to ask my first game, my sophomore year. I had to ask, what did they just say? It's just this thunderous champions don't choke, chant, and you're just like, whoa! But that's fired up.
Did you do that, Mark?
It scared the crap out of me when first time I heard it.
I did.
I did every game, and I was thinking maybe you guys probably had a copy too. If you want
I got a copy somewhere.
we all got copies.
I've
Yeah, I
got
got
it. So here's the interesting part of that as well. Ruben writes Coach Hardage, what's the history of that pregame speech that we're talking about? Because offense would go out, punt returners, everyone would go out and do special type stuff. Then we'd come in, get the team. We would all go out, do warm-ups. Then we'd all come back in. And Hardage, we'd all be kind of getting ready and mentally. And he was known to just write poise on a blackboard, and that was it. He wouldn't even talk to us. He would just write that on there. Then he gave the pregame speech. The pregame speech he wrote back to Ruben was, he believes one of either Ed Henry or one of his coaches that went to a Vince Lombardi camp came back from that, and that Hardage then implemented that into his pregame speech, and that he committed to typing it as a brand new. He didn't copy it off of what back then, what was the little things, the lithograph, whatever the
Mimeograph.
Videograph, there you go. He didn't copy it off of that. He actually would text or would type that and then read that. And he said to this day, when he reads it, it still gives him chills.
Yeah, me too.
Well, all great coaches are great teachers of coaches too. Obviously, you had some great assistant coaches. Who was on the staff that we can talk about?
Well, we've mentioned a few of them. Tom Seekules, who was the offensive wide receiver coach, and did he coach quarterbacks too?
Running backs.
Running backs.
And then he went on to open up South Lakes High School and was very successful over there. His son Scott became a quarterback and played at UVA, I believe. And
That's right.
the offensive line coach,
Bob Herb.
Coach Herb.
yeah,
Coach
Coach Herb. He went on to coach at Chantilly and was successful over at Chantilly. So
Yeah, Bob Herb was, I think, a 3-time All Southern Conference while at William and Mary.
That's great.
he
All
was.
those
I
coaches,
remember when
wow.
he started.
Yeah.
Didn't he become a coach at Annandale maybe our junior year?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was, no, I think it was your senior year. It was
I
our
think it was
junior
senior
year.
year.
Yeah,
Was it?
it was
Was it?
your senior year.
He was an intimidating guy when he was super intense, very intense.
Well, and he started the weight
Yeah.
program, really. I mean, we had the universal
Mhm.
gym, and Coach Herb brought his 45-pound plates and made sure that the offensive line would lift after every practice.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was another
built like
big.
a lot
That's
of-
another big difference between football today and football back then.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, the 165
Well, we
pound
worked out.
linebackers back then.
Yeah.
yeah.
We worked out.
Yeah, me and
You know,
Ron
but
worked
I
out,
think-
and that was about it, right?
We worked out, but I think to Julian, what he's saying was, you know, when you look at the staff, it was interesting how Coach Hardage, you know, when you look at great coaches and you look at how they perpetuate their philosophy and it goes into other coaches. Mark's a great example of that, the success he had. But the staff he had at that time, every one of those guys in their own right, and I'm not exaggerating, could have been a head coach. And at that time, it would have been a very successful head coach.
Mhm.
Everett Cloud, you know, Charlie Martin on the defensive side, and then those guys, Coach Herb and Coach Comerford had left already, but did a fantastic job, went with Sequels to South Lakes. And
Mhm.
all those guys that were there and they were committed. They were committed to Hardage. They were committed to the program. You know what I mean? It was bigger than them individually. And to me, it was interesting because after high school, you know, where Greg and I played, we played like on travel football as kids in high school, college, and your coaches, you always looked at I always was almost naive to football coaches and what I thought a coach was and how I looked up to a coach and the quality of the man and what he was as an individual, let alone a coach. And then I got into the real world and I was like, oh, okay, some of these guys are, you know, I would get around other coaches and other programs, but there was a time in my life where I looked at a football coach like, you know, it was the respect, you know, and Phil said a little bit of fear, but I think you start with some fear and then you get respect. And I think they were all so well respected. And I think I speak for all of us when we say that, and all successful within their own right, but all fully committed to that team, to that program.
Well, and Ronnie, I think they were all collegiate. They were all collegiate coach or players as well. Meaning
Yeah.
Everett
Not
Cloud
only-
was an All-American at baseball and football at Maryland.
Yeah,
Charlie
not only-
Martin was at West Virginia. Go ahead, Greg. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying they were all literally stars on their own rights. If you go through each of the coaches, they have tremendous, you know, resumes as players. And then they were able to bring that forward and really try to take what they learned along the way and bring it down to us. And I think what Ronnie tries to hit on constantly is, you know, we as a group, and I mean the entire community of players that came through the school, were open-minded enough that say, we're not doing it our way. We're doing it their way. And the coaches made sure we knew we're doing it their way. And everybody accepted that. And we, I think as a group, you know, in the off season, we preached the same thing. I remember, I think Mike and Ronnie, we're at a lake. I don't know who else was with us, but we're rowing these boats. And Ron's like, hey, we got to beat the other boat. We beat the other boat. We win the state championship this year. So everything was focused on winning football games, winning the state championship. That was the belief I think we all had, you know, the year before, you know, the 78 season.
Great memory.
I remember we went down to Charlottesville preseason. We took a bus down to Charlottesville to do a preseason game against, was it Charlottesville High or
Lane.
Yeah.
Get the hump burgers. Get the hump burgers.
And we didn't do a lot of that. That was the first time that I've ever been outside going somewhere to play a practice. But I remember after that game, I guess there was an article in the paper where that other coach said that that's the best high school football team he'd ever seen. And he felt confident that we had the ability to win the state championship. Internally, we held ourselves to that standard from day one. And, you know, as seniors, we made sure that a freshman or sophomore that came into the football program understood the way we did things. There was no, if somebody stepped out of line, we brought them right back in. There was the Annandale way, and that was just, it was expected of us. And it wasn't something that someone came and sat you down and said, okay, now you're a senior, so you got to do this. No, you just knew you had to do it because to uphold the tradition of what Annandale was.
Well, sit in the front of the class, right? That's a big part of when school started. You know, if he walked by the class and you weren't in the front row, he'd be talking to you at practice. You know?
Well, one of his, I don't know if it happened to you guys, but I didn't play as a freshman, and I was one of the tallest kids in the school, if not the tallest. And one of the bigger guys in the school, every time Coach Hardage passed me in the hallway as a freshman, he'd say, Denfeld, why didn't you go out for football? And I heard that time and time and time again. And the summer before my sophomore year, Danny Malm, who was a great wide receiver in Annandale and great basketball player, just a super athlete. He was a good friend of mine, lived right 2 doors away from Mike Gullette. And I went to Danny and I asked him, I said, Danny, do you think I should go out for football? And he said, absolutely, you should go out for football. So I went back and went down to the basement and talked to my dad. And my dad played football at Naval Academy. And I said, Dad, I think I want to go out for football this year. And he looked at me and he said, I think that's great, but I just want you to know that football is a very difficult sport and you got to be tough and it's going to be hard. And I said, I'm ready. And I went out as a sophomore, but the reason I did that was because the way Hardage hounded me my whole freshman year. He embarrassed me that I didn't play football. I said, well, I guess I need to do that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your rivals and some of the good players you played against. I did a podcast with Jim Smith, who was a tight end at Stewart, now Justice. And by the way, he just had his 500th career win in basketball for Meridian, which is the old George Mason in Falls Church. But he had said that him and the quarterback, Ken Sylvester, a guy that I used to play basketball with, that you guys were their rival. And it's one of those things where they had a great coach, Jerry Falls. And it's one of those things where you may have seen Woodson as your rival, but they saw you guys as their rival. And I think you guys probably had a couple of good games over the years. But anyway, who are some of the rivals that you had? And going into that year, what teams what games did you circle on the calendar as must wins?
I say
Williams.
I say TC Williams right off the top.
TC. I mean, I think that a lot. I'm not trying to be arrogant when I say this, but I think like whoever said the Jefferson game, Jim, people pointed us out on their schedule. I don't remember anything between Stewart or Woodson.
No.
I mean, we played them, but I remember TC. TC to me, we wanted, in my opinion, we wanted TC as much more than anybody because there was a lot of run up on that team, you know. But other than that, I mean, I guess Mike Woodson, is that what it was? Stewart was like had some talented kids once in a while, but I don't remember that being a big rivalry.
No, I don't either.
It was definitely TC number one, Fort Hunt and regionals. We seem to meet them going into regionals, the game before regionals. We seem to see them all the time. And that year they had some speed. They had Rocky Belk, Mark Bile, both amazing speed athletes.
Right. They were number 1 and number 2 in the state. The one of them was number 1 in the 100. The other was number 2 or number 1 in the 220 and vice versa. I mean, those guys got on a rail.
Yeah. But you got to remember, it's what Mark said. The way Hardage coached, he didn't ramp up or run up a rivalry, in my opinion. He would do it on players, like Jim said, as he was prepping, and he'd motivate you. But he wouldn't single out like a team or something. To me, it was about us, and they needed to worry about us, and we needed to do what we were supposed to do. And then obviously we would be successful, if that makes sense. Yeah. In my opinion, that's how he kind of framed things up. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't remember him ever getting,
No, I was going to jump in. I know Woodson, that game was always a tough game because they played outside of themselves because they wanted to beat us so badly. Robinson had Ed Henry as their head coach at the time, and they were a huge school compared to our numbers on some of the things. So that was a tough one. Lake Braddock was right up the road. So that was one that, wasn't as difficult at times, but certainly we knew the crowd was there. A lot of people would come out for that. I will tell you another story again, though, that shows the history of it. So Hardage, when they lose against TC William in 71, Hardage specifically requested that Annandale play TC Williams the first game of the year in 72. He had wrestlers that were, most of these guys said it was probably the smallest state championship team they'd ever had. But he remembered a reporter asking him, do you think it's unfair based on the merger of the schools? And do you think Annandale has a chance? And he said, my answer was, I'll tell you at the end of the game. And then that 72 team went on to be, I think, the third or second state championship team that Annandale had. So Hardage was pretty big on, I think, some of the things that if he could schedule based on some of the rivalries or other things. And I agree. I think that first year, or the 78 team, the articles started to come out that TC Williams, this was going to be one of the biggest games of the year. And when we won, you saw everyone go, okay, Annandale may be the real deal, I think is one of the first clippings that started to say, this could be a good team.
That had to be a TC Williams team portrayed in the movie, or was that the year after?
So the 72 was the year after the state champion. 71, is my understanding, was remember the Titans year.
I think that's right.
72 is when Hardage said, I want to play TC the first game of the year.
Okay. Yep. That sounds right. So let's talk about the season then. So I don't remember, were you guys undefeated that year? How did it start out? What were some of the tougher games that you had, and how did it go in general?
It went good. We won it all.
That's why we're here.
It went well. If it hadn't, we wouldn't be here, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that, like I think, Phil, you mentioned that we started getting a lot of publicity, and that we were the team to beat. I think probably the closest game, at least in the first half of the season, was Fort Hunt. We won that 21-14, and I know that Woodson gave us a lot of fits. We had terrible, it's kind of a rainy game, I think. Had terrible field position for most of the game. Jimmy Reed ends up returning a interception for a touchdown, and then Mark kind of pulled us with a touchdown pass to Tom Tatum there. So we won 14-0. The other games, I think, weren't particularly close, though, if you guys remember.
No, I'm trying to. So let me just show you.
I'll tell you what. It's interesting because our first year, or our year there, we were probably the first football team to ever play while that song "We Will Rock You" was out. And I remember the game against Stewart. We were sitting before the game in their locker room, and you just heard them pounding on their lockers, bum bum, psh, bum bum, psh, and doing that. That actually was probably one of my most vivid memories there.
But you're saying the games weren't close, but I heard Phil made an incredible catch or something, that there had to have been a close game, because I heard that there was a play that changed everything. Maybe that was the year before.
No, that was against Madison in the regional finals.
Okay.
It was a 0-0 score, and then I made a diving one-handed catch, and we went on and scored, and then we won 31-0. So it wasn't a close game after that. We scored that touchdown, and the floodgates opened. But I just wanted to show you. So this is a scrapbook of the regular season. This is a scrapbook of the playoffs.
Wow.
I have probably every article that was ever written that year.
It's because they were written about you.
That's right,
But
Phil.
I mean,
I think
I don't ever remember any really tight game. Well, actually, Fort Hunt during the regular season, I think we won 21-14, I want to say, or something like that.
Yeah. And, you know, there were times that I guess it was close for a quarter or two. And then things kind of got, you know, once it got to the middle or maybe toward the end of the first quarter, that's when we started picking things up, I think.
Well, we had a great defense, you know, I mean.
Well, yeah, I mean,
What'd
you know, if you remember, they had, so for the life of me, I don't know why Mark was not all region that year, right? I mean, Mark threw as a sophomore for, I don't know, 20, 25 touchdown passes and such. And yet when we hit the playoffs, there were a couple other, West Springfield had Mark Florio, who lost to Madison. And I think Herbie Heck was their quarterback, and Herbie, I think, had maybe 30 touchdown passes or what have you, and we kind of shut them down in that. But you know, I never understood why Mark wasn't all state, because he was the best thing we ever saw before that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
he beat me out of quarterback when he was a freshman, and so that's why I ended up being a defensive back. So I always had my eyes on him.
But you know,
funny.
when you look at that year, two points I want to make about that season. Number one is that probably Woodson and Fort Hunt were as good a team as any. Highland Springs, super talented. But Woodson had a really good football team that year. You know, they were, we got a lot of obviously the accolades and the recognition, but they were a real good high school football team. So was Fort Hunt. The other point I want to make on our team, Julian, was the depth of our team. You know, we keep going back to how, you know, we didn't Coach Hardage didn't run it up in the class, but we had some really good football players on that team. You know, we had great depth. You know, a lot of guys that played on that team that might not have started, in my opinion, would have started and been probably outstanding and recognized on a lot of other teams. I believe that.
But the other
Yes.
thing I've always said about our team is, you know, we weren't the biggest guys. I mean, we had some big players, but we had a lot of other guys that Coach Hardage just plugged them in and coached them up. And when I went and visited Mark Cox when he was coaching at Battlefield, and I remember you, Mark, you had a little guard that was probably 160 or something. You said, I go, God, he's little. He goes, yep, we just coach him up, teach him what to do, you know. So Hardage did that probably as good as any coach could.
Yeah, we ended up having, I think we ended up having what, 11 or 12 guys that were
There was a lot.
first team all region in Northern Virginia. I don't know, 4 or 6 guys who were all state there. But it's interesting too, when you say depth, I know we had Greg, maybe what was Reggie Whalen played a lot.
Yeah.
And because maybe 1 or 2 you guys were hurt.
I was sick there and missed the first game completely.
Yeah.
Tried to come back too early against TC, played the first half, and then I was out again. So Reggie played a lot early in the season. And then, like Phil said, you know, Hatch and I had to get our 100 yards and a touchdown by halftime because we knew we were coming out one series afterwards. So if we wanted that steak dinner with Coach Gill, we had to knock it out by halftime.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say with these things with the memories, Julian. So we had a pep rally is my first recollection of this. It was before the school season even started. So it was like on a whatever the Tuesday, Wednesday, and there was only about 50 of us and the cheerleaders and the band, and we'd go from what was Fritzby's, right now Silverados, and we would go down to the school. And we showed up, and there were probably 25, 30 people that were in the stands for the pep rally that weren't football players or cheerleaders. And Hardage said, I will ask you to stand up on December, he gave the date, like December 3rd, when we're playing for the state championship. And all of us looked at each other like, this is a coach that doesn't talk about anything except Friday's game. He just said he thinks we're going to state. So I think based on what you heard Greg and Ronnie and Mike and Phil as the captains, because again, I was a junior, Mark was a sophomore, these guys set the bar very high for who we played and what we did and how we had to act. And if you didn't cut the fool, if you did, man, somebody would straighten you out on your own team pretty quick. So that was kind of the first recollection to it. But then going back, Tim Krieber got hurt. Tom Tatum was out. We mentioned Reg Whalen playing as a running back. A lot of these guys got game time experience because we were out after the first series in the third quarter, and these guys got in and got to play. So I think that helped bode well that when they did get called in to go in, they felt like they'd been with the team and were there. Nobody was like, oh, crap, he's in. That was never a thought in our mind. It was to say, we got your back, man. Glad you're in. Let's go. And down the field we went.
Wow.
And the state game, Mike got injured. He can talk more on what that is, but we had to bring in a guy that hadn't started to play. So
Wow.
Yeah, John Merriman came in. He did great.
Frangelo got moved to safety, right? He got moved to your spot.
Yeah. On the other hand, I quite honestly, I thought our defense was such that we probably could have played throughout the regular season with probably 9 guys and wouldn't have had any difference in result. That was such a frustrating season for a defensive back because we weren't even needed. Thank you. Thanks, Ron.
Mike, was the first team defense unscored upon till playoffs or no?
No, we got scored upon about 2 or 3 or 4 times.
I think Fort Hunt scored.
We beat. I'm just looking. We beat Fort Hunt 21-14. We beat Lake Braddock 28-7. Beat TC Williams 27-6. Beat Woodson 14-0. It's as far as I've gotten so far, but
Phil, some of that scoring was against the first D.
Yeah,
it was either first D or special teams.
TC ran a
It was good ball. And Julian, simple.
Yeah.
I mean, we ran one defense.
Well,
we had a short yardage defense and one. I mean, we ran 2 defenses, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Basically, a 5-4 and a 6-5.
Just a chronology though. Who did you guys have to play in the playoffs? You had to win 2 games to get to the state playoffs. Is that how it went back then?
We had Madison. Madison was the first game.
No. Madison was not. Fort Hunt.
Fort Hunt was first.
Oh, that's right.
Madison was second.
Fort Hunt, Madison, GW Danville, and then Highland Springs.
Yeah.
And Madison, to your point, Ronnie, Madison's record was, they thought they were the guys going to the state championship.
There were 3 teams in our region, West Springfield, Madison, and us, that were 10-0 in the regular season. So Madison beat West Springfield that first week of the playoffs, while we beat Fort Hunt, that had lost to us before that. And then we played Madison.
We beat them. We beat Fort Hunt 21-0. Then we beat Madison 31-0. Then we beat GW Danville
17-0.
Wow.
17-0. And then Highland Springs 14.
That's playing some defense.
Yeah.
I remember going into that Fort Hunt playoff game. We knew we had a pretty tough game against them in the regular season. It was like the second or third week of the season. Mm-hmm. And like Mike said, they had unbelievable running backs. And I remember I wasn't nervous, but I knew we had to be on our game that day. And then we just, 21-0. It wasn't even
defense shut them down.
Yeah.
Well, they actually did a pretty good job of gaining some yardage on us the first quarter. They basically used, I think they used both Mile and Belk as blockers and let Harry Hurst run. I knew Harry at UVA, and I think Harry got hurt or something, and that kind of ran that, and we just pretty much shut him down after that. They were good. I mean, they were very good. And
years later, I'm in the mortgage business, and I was doing a loan for somebody, and he kind of remembered my name, and he goes, "I got to tell this friend of mine. This guy went to Madison." And he goes, "I got to tell my friend, would you mind if he called you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." And so one day the phone rings and this guy calls me up, and he was just telling me, he goes, "You guys were so good." He goes, "We thought we were going to beat you. And when we played against you, you hit us harder than anybody ever had. And you guys were just so much better than us. I just thought it was in him, and he was still carrying that with him years later, just.
Yeah, and when you say that, I mean, granted, you're going to hear all the offensive guys as well know that our defense, the swarm tackling, there were very few one-on-one tackles. It was a team of guys that did that. But the other thing that was instilled that we talked about earlier is in this pregame speech, it's mistakes, gentlemen, do not make them. So Hardage was always big about, no penalties, and I forget what the stat is, but it's something crazy, like only 2 or 3 penalties in 4 or 5 games going in through the playoffs. And, that's the other part, I think, that was the discipline as we were coached. If you run the ball and get tackled, hop up, run back to the huddle, get ready to run the next play. Don't, do your hand forward like you just scored a first down. You didn't, if your jersey wasn't tucked in, he would call you off if someone didn't tuck your jersey in the huddle. Pull your socks up. Our socks had to be pulled up. White shoelaces, you couldn't play.
One thing. Yeah. No, I was just going to say that one thing that stands out in my mind about the defense, Julian, was probably the best looking bunch of young men.
I mean, this Jim guy's handsome.
I'm going to speak.
Yeah, thank you, man.
As we've aged, I think that probably still holds true.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think so, Ron. I think that's probably it.
I wanted to ask
Make sure
Coach
you
Mark.
get that in the cast.
I want to ask Mark over here. What was it like to play quarterback as a sophomore on a big? Was it a lot of pressure because the team was so good, or because the team was so good, it was easier to just go in there and do your thing because you had a great supporting staff?
Well, first, I don't know how good looking they were, but they were. I was so intimidated, and they were scary in person, just because they were psycho.
He's talking about our defense now.
I'm talking about the defense.
Yeah.
I was just a little sophomore, and to be honest with you, I was intimidated by all these guys on the screen.
I would think so.
And
You didn't show it though.
the only one of the stories I've told everybody is Ronnie chased me around the locker room and throwing tape balls at me. So, no, you talk about it, but the way Coach Hardage was, I never gave a whole lot of thought into who we were playing,
Right.
or who our rivals were.
Mm-hmm.
It was always just do your job. And we never made a big deal about any of it. I was there just to do what Coach Hardage said and to help these guys the best I can, and don't screw up.
Yeah, right.
And everybody had each other's back. It's
100%.
those things were the important things, not who we were playing and what's score going to be. Those things weren't important. It's just play for your teammates, do your responsibility, be disciplined, and just do what you're coached to do.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, I think Greg and I will share that, we would get the play called to be able to score from 2 yards out, and somehow we'd look at each other and know you'd give the double tap to the center and just sneak it. So we'd have had at least 3 or 4 more touchdowns if you weren't the guy that was always going for the touchdowns.
Well, he gave me permission to do that whenever I wanted to.
Yeah, we know that. That's what we're complaining about.
Yeah.
After all these years, it finally comes out.
Yeah.
What was
Go
ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, the other thing I will say about our team, well, number one, I just want to compliment Mark. I never felt like he was intimidating. I think what you portrayed was that you were just as confident and a part of the group, so to speak. I never felt like you didn't feel like you belonged there, so maybe you hit it well. But the other thing I will say is, we didn't have any prima donnas on our team. I mean, I felt like everybody felt everyone was an equal, and we treated each other that way, and we played together that way. I mean, it was all of us or none of us is the way I kind of remember it.
I'll expand on that. And I agree, Phil, especially when looking at Mark. When we played with Mark, he actually took a leadership role on the field. We looked at Mark coming in. He had poise and what appeared to have the confidence and leadership abilities to just, he had the game and
Mhm.
he's going to tell us where we're going and what we're doing, and we're going to make it happen.
Yeah, he'd step in the huddle, get down on one knee, and he'd say, "All right, guys, let's go," or something. And then we were all like, "Okay, yes, sir." I mean, there was never a time where we didn't feel like he was our leader in the huddle and on the field. So
But you know where that came from,
Hardage.
Hardage. It was because you tried to model yourself after somebody that you respect and you believe in what they do.
Right.
Mhm,
So basically, I was just an extension of Coach Hardage in the huddle.
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
So how did the community receive you guys after you won the championship? And I guess and became national champions. I was at I went to the South Lakes basketball game the other night in the regional finals, and they won. And I happened to go to a bar near the school just to where some of the coaches were coming in, the principal and stuff. And when the head coach came into the restaurant, the whole place kind of stood up and gave him an ovation. It was kind of it reminded me of when I was younger, how important high school sports meant, where you'd walk around, people would ask you about the game and what do you guys think about the game? So how are you guys received? Like, for example, what happens after your games? Did you go to Frisbee's and hang out, or how did the community accept your winning and your success?
They participated with us. We went to McDonald's, actually. There's a McDonald's
Classic guys.
that we went to after the game. It was great. In the summer, we're actually right down from that. We went to Highs for in summer ball when we were doing 2 days to get our frozen drinks and stuff. But game time, game was over, went to McDonald's, and it was all, we did this, we did that. So it was the community saying, they did it along with us. So it felt, it was basically a huge family. And especially,
it's not like when we arrived there or something, it's not like we were, I don't know, hailed as some sort of conquering heroes. We were just kind of part of the crowd.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
I think we were just as excited to see all of our classmates when we got to McDonald's as they were to see us. And I'll tell you what, I mean, I wish I had, if you had cell phones back in that day and you would see photos or movies of what that McDonald's in that parking lot and every street around that McDonald's was like after a Friday night game, was ridiculous. I mean, it was standing room only, inside, outside, all around that McDonald's. It was crazy.
But Julian, it was never, you guys did great. It was like, hey, we won. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Hardage was big about, complimenting us, great game, whatever it was. But then he went into the, look, go home, drink your juices, don't do any, because we all knew if we did anything stupid, the call was coming and Hardage got the first call. Yeah. So this is where upperclassmen made sure nobody stepped out of line. And the community, the school part of it, Hardage always from the very beginning, if you're wearing the red and white, you're representing the school, you're representing the community, you're representing the football team. So don't go out there and make an ass of yourself because I'm going to hear about it. So in the back of our minds, football players will be football players and we'd go out and celebrate with the best of them. But everybody had everybody's back to make sure nobody was doing anything stupid that would embarrass the program.
Yeah, when you walked around with a leather jacket like this, and every one of us had one, everybody knew who you were. And, you put that on as a sense of pride, but you also put it on as a banner that you were representing Annandale High School, and not just yourself, but everything that it stood for. And I think that meant a lot to every one of us. I mean, the fact that I still have this thing, I threw it on tonight just kind of as a joke, but I mean, the fact that I've still held on to it because it still means something to me. We've got game jerseys. Mark's got his on. I got mine on. I mean, that's what it was about, And when you got a red jersey with a white number on it and a white helmet with that Annandale Adam logo, that was special. That was really special.
Yeah, we were it was interesting because other than that logo, it was almost a vanilla team kind of dress. There was no other special kind of shoes or anything like that or anything else. And
there was no white shoes, which were cool back then. There was no white shoes. We had black shoes. Everybody had the same shoes, black shoes, white laces. You had to polish them before every game, polish your helmets before every game.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't know how many times I had moms calling me. in my coaching years saying, "You made my son take a black magic marker and color his white cleats." Because they weren't allowed to wear white.
That's
ever.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
love
that was a very unique thing about Annandale High School, and I don't know if many other high schools in the area at that time did it, but we got we got shoes from the school. We all wore Riddell football cleats, and you had to put brand new white laces in every week. They couldn't be dirty. You either washed them or you got new ones. We had to polish our helmet after Thursday practice. We'd stand outside the garage out the side by the gym, and everyone you'd scrub it with a Brillo pad and then wipe it off and then put polish on it and polish it all up. I remember we tried to get Hardage to put red face masks on the helmet our senior year. We had just plain old gray face masks with a white helmet. We were like, it'd be really cool to have red face masks. And he was like, nope, not doing it. It's nothing to stand out.
He also, I mean, it started with two-a-days. He made it clear, take your stuff home in between practices, wash your practice jersey, wash your pants. And if you came out with grass in it, you didn't wash your pants, you were either running, you were doing something. And he made a point, don't ask your mom to do it. You do it. It's your job. So, I mean, it was pretty clear of how we had to represent and shower after every practice. Whereas teams today, if I'm not mistaken, Dick Adams and Coach Scott, as the predecessors, still require the team to shower before they get on the bus at the opposing school. Whereas most kids get right on the bus and go. That's not the Annandale way.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Mark?
You don't know how many times I had to try to find some white shoelaces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just knew we wouldn't play.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you guys, we had an incredible high school career, and Mark and I think Greg were underclassmen, so I guess you guys had some more chances. But why don't we talk a little bit about what came after and what you did after, and then what playing football for Annandale meant for the rest of your life. I think some of you guys have already touched on that, but Ron, why don't you go first, and you can share with us whatever you like. College, football, and in life, what would you end up doing, and whatever you want to share.
Thank you for the opportunity. Went to the University of Minnesota, played up there was recruited by Joe Salem, played for a guy named Bruce Vandersall, then Lou Holtz came in, played for him. Had a great experience with him, and it was interesting because, as I alluded to when I first opened up, all those coaches from Coach Hardage all the way through to Lou Holtz all had the same fundamental philosophy that we've all discussed tonight. So that was great. Had a tremendous impact on me. Coached up there 1 year as a GA, had some surgeries and different things, coached under him and enjoyed that. And then to be candid, wanted to try to take on something new, and different. So went from there, and then got kind of a late start career-wise and everything, but ended up in the property and casualty insurance business. And that's been fantastic for me. I got two great kids, both in college now, one at Radford, one at JMU, and tremendously blessed in that area. And real happy with where I am from a business standpoint. That's the challenge that I have. I competed in rodeo and won a national championship in 07 in rodeo, and that was kind of my offshoot. It's the only thing we could still do full contact. You know what I mean? I'm not really a golfer or a softball kind of guy. So I did that, and I have a farm in Leesburg, and I rope all the time. Matter of fact, I rope today. So I still compete in that regard. The horse is the athlete, and he does all the work. I just kind of sit up there and do what I'm supposed to do. So I really enjoy that. And alluding back to business, have had a great career. Multiple offices in 9 states, got a fantastic group of people that work with me. And I will say this, I run that organization just like these guys I'm sure would, and just like we grew up and how we ran that and how that football team was run. It's completely relationship based. You got to care. You got to have a desire. There's fundamentals that there's a standard you have to meet. And it's okay if you don't meet that need or it's not your cup of tea, it's okay, but you're not going to fit that organization. And I do hold them to that standard, and I do try to establish a culture, and I try to hold them to it. And I get up every day and kind of love what I do. And it's the insurance piece is what we do is great. We try to help people, but the reality is the yield. It's what it gives us. It's the group of people I work with and our relationships and what we accomplish. And to be candid, what we go through and the adversity we face in life and how we overcome it and support each other and try to thrive and create the best possible environment to work in and to live in that we can every day. And again, I got that through that game, through these guys and through that staff. So I feel very, very fortunate to have had those experiences and had the impact that it's had on me. And I try to perpetuate that and have that go out into the group of people that I'm dealing with every day, as well as my kids. So.
And Ron, what kind of sports parent were you? Were you the kind, I imagine if your kid missed a tackle, he wasn't going to eat that night, or were you?
I had to learn. It's funny because when they talked about us getting beat by Jefferson, it was my junior year. I was supposed to watch Dick Adams and Jamie Carrianas, they've all talked about them, coached at Annandale, like my half brothers. They played at Richmond. I was going down to Richmond that Saturday to watch them play, and I wasn't allowed to go because we got beat. Number one. So that's how I grew up. But to answer your question, I came from a D1 program. The first year I coached youth football, I was very fortunate to coach with another guy who played at Maryland. And he pulled me aside and said, wait a minute, slow down, kid ball. And so I learned, and it kind of reverted back to what these guys had said, Phil had said about the simplicity of Annandale and defenses. And I'll say this, we had great success in youth sports. We definitely played to win, but correctly, and what I felt was ethically and with class. But we wanted to go out, and we wanted to establish ourselves, and we wanted to enjoy that. I did learn over time to dial it back a little bit. The last year I coached 6 to 8 year old flag football. We were undefeated. And I was at the banquet, and I was starting to give a speech about being undefeated and how special it is to play on an undefeated team to 6 to 8 year old flag football. And I looked around, and the hair was starting to stand up what's left on the back of my neck. And a buddy of mine was coaching with me. He looked at me and he kind of nodded his head. And I said, oh, okay. And I kind of dialed it back in, and I told everybody, well, we had a great year. Let's eat some pizza. So they all laughed and they all ate. But yeah, it took me a while to kind of learn how to evolve into what I needed to do from a coaching standpoint. But
I can kind of see that.
Yeah. But I enjoyed it. My son played here at Loudoun County High School, got hurt, tore the labrum in his shoulder his senior year. But, I always say this about football, and this is the truth. It takes the way we played, my interpretation of the way we played the game, it takes everything you have. The game demands that from us. And there's a bond that we have, and it's special. It is, and it's a special game, and it's still available, as I mentioned. But it takes that. It takes a special group of people with a special relationship to be able to accomplish those things, to overcome what it takes to be able to accomplish those things and be successful. And that 100% is a life formula. And, those are the biggest things that I got out of it. And I think that, as I mentioned, I'm so thankful for that. And I do, I use it every day.
Yeah.
So,
in
that regard, it's been great.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Ron. That was great. So Mike, why don't you go next, my fellow Wahoo?
Hey, well, I was, I'll be I think I was the first dropout of this group because I dropped out before they even dropped in. I originally went to the Naval Academy.
Oh, okay.
And I had my oldest brother went to Woodson. He went there, he graduated. I have another brother who also went to Annandale. He left after a couple of years. I left after plebe summer, and it just probably wasn't something I had done much thinking about and beforehand. So I ended up leaving there, but then went to UVA the next semester. So I was there by the spring of 1980, and played there on the spring season there, and eventually just said I'm going to spend all my time focused on books and other studies and such like that. So I became both things a CPA and do a lot of things. Now I work kind of as a policy analyst for the banking industry.
Oh, awesome.
I think the thing that I guess this whole experience had prepared me. It was a couple things. First, we had, and Greg can attest to, even from freshman year, we had this objective of going all the way to state, and it was pretty. It was, and remember, I had said that I hated Annandale until I got there. It was pretty early where I decided that, boy, Annandale ain't so bad. This is great. And even as I remember going on a freshman team bus and such like that. And we had these objectives, and I think that it really taught me about having these long-term objectives, and that these objectives not only can be achieved but even exceeded. Nobody thought that we were going to be like in these echelons of state or of national championship either. And it also really gave me a focus that we can't do any of this stuff without our teammates. And I grew up. My father died when I was like in sixth grade, and you see Ron, especially Ron, Phil and Greg and their families, welcomed me into their lives so much, especially Phil and Greg. I think Phil, I must have spent most of our sophomore year in high school over at your house, right? And they were almost as much of my parents as my mom, who's still living here and over there in Annandale. But those kind of people, they become not only friends, but really inspirations for your life. And they still continue to impress, whether I'm able to talk to them on any kind of daily basis or not, just by seeing what they're doing, how they're doing with their families and their careers. So it's been the experience just taught me that we're all in this together, and I have to rely on these other family members.
Yeah, you're also lucky to be part of something so wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Coach Mark, why don't you go next? I knew you were winning a lot of games. I'd see your name on the papers and later on the internet because they don't have high school sports in the papers anymore. Why don't you tell us about some of your successes and share whatever you care to?
Well, I've been very fortunate. I got to play, which if anybody says they've got to start 3 years in college at Virginia Tech, not many quarterbacks actually stick around that long. They're either trying to go to the NFL or they bring somebody else into play. So I had a very long and really, really nice career. I tell the kids at school, I'm like, you guys know Bruce Smith? They have no idea who Bruce Smith is, but that was big time. I got to play with Bruce Smith, a lot of good people. And, after that, I did get a tryout with the Redskins. That was the year that Theismann broke his ankle. And they brought me in for a workout. And they said, we just signed this guy named, God, I can't remember, big tall one. Anyway.
Schroeder.
No, Rippon.
Oh, yeah, Mark Rippon.
It was Mark. And they said, but we have a team that we work with in Canada. If you would think you would want to go to Canada and play. I was like, I've milked my career playing as much as I could. I felt that I felt once I left Annandale, I wasn't quite as good. I don't know if that's because of, the people in Annandale, the players, the people that we played with, and the whole family atmosphere made you better. And that's something that I tried to carry over into my coaching days. You know, I could have kept on playing, but like, you know what? I really just want to go ahead and graduate. I was a GA for a year, went ahead and graduated. And the first person I went back to try to get a job was Bob Herb and Jimmy Powell, who was an Annandale coach too, at Stonewall Jackson. And I just wanted to give back to Annandale, and I ended up coaching for Bob Hardage and then Dick Adams. You know, not many guys can say that they coached with Dick Adams, Bob Hardage, Danny Meyer, Mark Bendorf, Mark. I got a lot of good experience from all those guys. I was really fortunate, and you know what. And I always look back at what made me was Annandale and the game of football and Bob Hardage. What I learned, and my goal in life has always been, I had the opportunity to play in college. I had a great high school career. My goal in coaching has always been give as many kids the opportunities that I had, because it was something that was so impactful to me. So that's the reason why I stayed in coaching for 31 years. Well, actually, I coached this year again. Probably will next year too. Not as a head coach, because you got to deal with all the mess. But you know,
great.
it's just something that's always been my goal, was to help. You know, I had such a good time, learned so much through football. I wanted to introduce that and give as many kids that chance that I could.
Coach, I think my biggest regret of my career is that I didn't coach, because all I ever wanted to be is a high school coach. And I think that's why I've stayed involved in local sports and I'm doing podcasts, because I just love it. And, you know, coaches, I've done a lot of podcasts of especially basketball coaches, and they know so much about the history. They have so many relationships. And most of the ones I've talked to are so happy in retirement. You know, a lot of times you don't get paid tons for what the hours you put in, for sure, but you get paid, you know, handsomely in the influence that you have on the people that you coach and those relationships that you have. So it's wonderful when guys like yourself do it.
Well, it's self-rewarding, and you don't, and like these guys, they still, you know, we just had our reunion with the coaches, our 78.
Yeah.
And to see those guys and see the coaches, it's so rewarding, and everybody's thankful for each and every individual there and what they did for them. And, you know, to give kids that opportunity to have that feeling in that situation, that's priceless.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Coach. That was great. So Greg, why don't you go next? I know you end up playing running back at Shepherd, I believe.
Yeah, very good. I'm gonna go off track here just a second, take a step back. You know, when I look back at that senior year and really I look at the guys on the team, I look at them as family that I would have done anything for. And you know, my senior year was one of mixed emotions. And that's, you know, I came in as prepared as I possibly could play football that year. I trained literally daily, mid-heat. I was ready to go. And the week before the first game, I got really sick. I came down with some kind of virus and had 104.5 temperature. Wasn't able to go to the first game. Tried to come back early before TC. You know, we talk about TC being a big rival, and we were saying, you know, I was excited to come back. I said, my fever broke, and the coaches basically met me. They had one coach meet me on Monday morning, and we were playing TC on a Saturday because they didn't have lights on their field. So the coach came out, Coach Cloud actually walked me to the clinic, had me take my temperature at the clinic, and it was 98.6. Well, in the morning, your temperature is always low. So he said, come back by yourself in the afternoon, check it again. So I came back, it was a little over 99. The nurse is like, Greg shouldn't play. I was like, all right, boom, straight to the locker room, put on the gear, started playing. As the week went on, temperature went up. By Friday, my temperature was back up to around 104. It was drifting between 102 and 104. So my dad takes me to the doctor. Doctor looks at me and he's like, well, you got a swollen spleen, swollen glands, high temperature. I don't think you should play. I was like, what's the risk? He's like, well, swollen spleen, you get hit wrong, it can rupture, you need a surgery. I'm like, oh, okay. So we walk out. My dad looks at me, and I wouldn't do this myself. My dad looks at me and said, I'm going to let you make the decision whether you play or not. So I go to the locker room. I'm talking to Ronnie. Ronnie goes, man, if you got mono or something like that, you're going to be out for a number of weeks anyway. Greg, you get us past TC. We'll get us to the playoffs. You'll be there for the championship. I'm like, sounds good to me. So, of course, we weren't playing on a cool Saturday. It was a 90-degree plus day.
It was hot.
Yeah.
I left my house and my temperature was almost 102. So I was like, I'm gonna play anyway. I'm gonna make this happen. And it was what you're doing. It's how hard can you push yourself? I mean, is it crazy? I look at it now. Would I do it again? I don't know. Probably. At least in that mindset, I would have. So I went out, pre-game, I know the coach is looking at me because we go out, we're catching punts and stuff, balls dropping around me. And every time I looked up, things got a little blurry and I wasn't catching the punch. Then pre-game, we're going through some drills, goal line drills, and Jimmy Reed, he's never one to let up. So I was taking a pitch around the end, and you're just supposed to kind of stop each other. Well, Jimmy stops me head to head. Boom. So at that point, I'm not feeling the pain or the heat. I'm aware of what's going on around me, but I was just kind of there. So I was like, all right, let's do this. And TC takes the kickoff back for a touchdown. I'm like, oh man, now I've got to play. And so we get the ball. Now I was walking into the season on every special team and then on offense as well. Well, I got taken off every special team, and then I'm only playing offense. So I'm playing tailback at the time. And we start going down the field. And I remember Mark threw me a pass downfield, and it was a little short. And I came kind of diving back for it. It looked more like a short pass and me missing it than it was me just literally falling on my face, which was probably more accurate to the situation. And I'm back in the huddle. And again, I was always focused on fitness, and I'm breathing hard. And Phil looks over at me and is like, Greg, hey man, if you feel that bad, you got to take yourself out. And I said, Phil, I might have to. And then Mark calls the play as a screen pass to me. So fortunately, I caught the ball and had some phenomenal blocking and just followed my blocks and took it, I don't know if it was 30 or 40 yards for a touchdown. And that changed the momentum of the game. The coaches came over and Coach Hardage throws me on the bench. He's like, hey, we're just going to stick you back in if we need you. They start packing ice around my neck.
I remember that.
I was like, we were all just excited. The momentum turned like that. It's like TC set us on our heels. We came right back and scored, put it in their face, kicked the extra point. So I'm saying, all right, I'm out playing much in the next two games because of that. And then I banged my knee up a little bit against Wakefield. So coming off the season, I felt, we won the championship, and that's what it's all about. But I feel I didn't reach my own potential. I was like, what can I really do? And so, I didn't get recruited by any of the big schools like Ronnie or Mark or Phil or Mike. I just was like, Shepherd gave me the opportunity. I said, you know what? I'm just going to prove myself I can play on that level. Well, I ended up choosing after the summer ball. I said, listen, I walked in the coach. I said, listen, I was sick before I came up. I redshirted that year, came back the following year. And by the way, I played with three guys from that Madison team played with me up to Shepherd. One of them was the All-Met Offensive Player of the Year, Ricky Lipscomb. Ricky, really good ball player, good guy. He and I were competing tailback. There's 9 of us came in for tailback. He and I were competing. He played his freshman years. He started as a freshman. I came in my third game of the season. I beat him out. So I took over for Ricky as starter. We did alternate a lot. We did share a lot of time in the backfield, but I'm like, in my own mind, I was like, all right, that's a little bit of justification in my own mind. I can play at a little bit higher level. Here's this guy. He was the All-Met Offensive Player of the Year. I just took his position from him. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. So I started 3 years at Shepherd. We had some really good teams on that level. Didn't play my senior year. We were going to national championship, got my jaw fractured in practice. So I said, you know what? I'm going to focus on grades. I'm obviously not going pro. So I just, didn't play my senior season, focused on grades, basically got almost straight A's. Came out and went into the investment world. And I think, the ability and the thing you learned from that high school football was, discipline and hard work. And so I went into the investment field, and I knew I could outwork anybody. I worked for the first couple of years for E.F. Hutton, and actually worked with a guy I played in college with that was a couple of years ahead of me. And I came in, he goes, Greg, I'll get you an interview with the manager. And I came in with the manager and said, hey, there's smarter guys than me in here, but there's nobody that's going to outwork me. The guy goes, all right, you got a job. I'll give you a shot. So I did well for myself there. And a few years later, I got convinced to help start an investment firm. So three of us, I said, all right, things just came together at the right time. It was in Georgetown. So three of us started this firm. We, through the 90s, grew it to about 28 people. Sold it in 99 to who I work for now, Capital Securities. The president of Capital Securities said, Greg, if you want to come in and take over as president of Capital Securities, you can do that. I said, no, Joe, don't think so. I like working with my clients. I had a partner I worked with, still work with, Bill Stade. I worked with him since 95. And we built a great investment advisory business. We manage now over 600 million, primarily wealthy, not super wealthy, but successful individuals that, are planning or are in retirement. So we really specialize in retirement planning or retirement income planning, and had just had a phenomenal career. Love what I do. Love working with my clients. We brought in $100 million worth of new assets, almost all in referrals last year, which for us, we're paid a percentage of assets. So that's a very good thing from our perspective. But as Ron said, you have to have character, and the people have got to see that in you. You got to, work extremely hard. But what I did also was break it down to the basics. We don't get fancy. I don't do any fancy hedge funds or things along those lines. We just go back to formulas of work. We're very disciplined about managing the money. We're very good with, communicating with our clients, letting them know what's going on, keeping them informed. And it's worked out really well for us. I mean, literally, Julian, better than I could have ever dreamed. So it's like my perseverance, and I went through tough times in this as well. I mean, in our early years of starting that firm, I lived poorer than I did in college. So it wasn't all glory the entire time. It was keeping your nose to it, keep busting ass, do what's right for your client, push forward, do it again. And it's worked out real well. So now I sit here, I'm married, got married a little bit later in life, but have an 8-year-old, a 12-year-old. So I'm the old guy with young kids, and all the guys are laughing at me saying, oh man, wouldn't want to be handling young kids at your age. But literally, as Ronnie says, he's out roping bulls still. Through my 40s and 50s, I was competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so I love that. And that, like Ronnie says, that's the only time you can actually get out and, throw somebody on the ground and try to put them in pain, choke them out, put them to sleep, whatever. That was my opportunity to do it as an old man, because I'm like, I didn't get started until I was 40. Yeah. So I did, Krav Maga for, a number of years, then moved into the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I was like, this is great. And sometimes I get the tar. I don't do it anymore just because childcare issues with my mother-in-law when she had a stroke. So I had to, help out with the kids a lot more. But it was really stuff like that. But all good.
Well, Greg, I'm the old guy of the young kids as well. Just curious, one of my favorite basketball players when I was in middle school, intermediate school, was Mark Palmer. He was, they said, the white guy at TC Williams. Yep. And I know he just killed it at Shepherd. Did you know Mark?
Yeah, I did. Mark, great athlete, fantastic athlete, great guy.
Great guy, great player.
Yeah. Yep, great player, but great guy too. He's a really good guy.
Yeah, years later, I was refereeing basketball down in Charlottesville, and he was coaching down there somewhere. So, anyway, Phil, why don't you go next? Phil, say about what you've been up to and what some of the things that you experienced in life.
So, got highly recruited out of Annandale, really because of the success we had as a program, and was very fortunate to get a full scholarship to Wake Forest University. I got recruited by 60 some schools, but I wanted to stay somewhere close to home where my parents could come watch me play. I went down to Wake Forest and really went there because number one, it's a really good academic school, and I was a good student in high school and felt that was important. And also I went because the head coach, John Makovic, was like a Bob Hardage. And so I maybe a little bit, not as quite as tough, but he was tough, but he was a motivator and the kind of guy that I wanted to play for. And I kicked all 4 years at Wake Forest. I punted some, and I started as a wide receiver, went down to Wake Forest with a cast on my right hand. I broke my wrist during basketball season, my senior year, and got it x-rayed right away, and the break didn't show up. It was a small bone in the wrist. I played all high school basketball and soccer, senior year soccer as a goalkeeper. And every now and then I'd get a shot on my arm, and man, it would hurt. But I went and got it x-rayed again before I went down to Wake Forest and found out it was broken. So they put a cast on it. They weren't sure it was going to heal, and it never did. So I was a second team wide receiver with a cast and 4 fingers sticking out of a cast. But then my spring of my freshman year, they moved me to tight end, and I beat out a senior and 2 juniors and became the starting tight end my sophomore year at Wake Forest. And I led the ACC in receiving my junior year. I was all ACC. I was all ACC again my senior year. And I had set a goal that I wanted to play professional football. I mean, I knew when I went to Wake Forest, my goal was to play professional football. So I was pretty focused on doing that. The soccer coach at Wake Forest asked me to come play goalkeeper for him. He said I didn't need to come into practice. I could just come play in games, but I told him, nope, not interested. I want to play football. And so then my spring of my senior year, I was like just early January, I got a phone call in my dorm room one day, and it was the general manager for the Arizona Wranglers of this new league, the USFL. And he said, Phil, we really want you down here. We need another tight end in camp, and we really like you to join us. And I had an agent at the time. I talked to him. I went and talked to my dad and my head coach at Wake Forest, and which was Al Groh at the time, and tried to get some advice on what I should do. And I decided to give it a shot, as a lot of people did, Jim Kelly and Steve Young and, a lot of other people went to the USFL and, played the whole first year at the USFL. Then I was part of the largest trade in sports franchise history. Our entire team was traded to the Chicago Blitz, and the whole Chicago Blitz team moved to Arizona. Then they took half of us and sent them over to start the new franchise in Memphis. So I was at the Chicago Blitz under Marv Levy. He was the head coach, and he was another in that kind of same mold. Marv Levy was an amazing coach. I actually made the team, and then got released the next day because they wanted to cut a guy and keep me, but we didn't know our owner had given the team back to the league, and the league told Marv, you can't cut anybody with a guaranteed contract. And they had signed a guy out of the Green Bay Packers who they were trying to make a wide receiver, and he didn't really practice much during camp, kind of got injured and didn't do much, but they couldn't cut him. So anyway, I got let go and ended up signing with the Kansas City Chiefs, went through all the training camp with the Kansas City Chiefs, and about a week and a half before the first game got released, and I was married by then, and I looked at my wife who was living at my parents' house, and I said, it's time to move on. So, but I carried with me what I learned from Coach Hardage and from my youth soccer coach. They were both very similar in nature, and I coached high school football. I coached all of my kids in soccer. I was involved. They were all swimmers. I refereed swim meets and stuff. But I volunteered coaching high school football because I wanted to give back. Much like Mark said, I felt like it was almost my obligation to share what I could to try to influence, even if it was just one kid, the way I was influenced by Coach Hardage. I mean, I hold him in high regard for what he did for me as a human being. And there's not a day goes by that the influences that I had in my life based on his way of going about a work ethic and a discipline, that that has impacted me tremendously. So I'm fortunate now. I ran a family business for about 18 years. Then I got into the mortgage business, and now I'm the COO of a mortgage company that does $3.5 billion in revenue a year, or business a year. So,
Wow.
Been a good ride, and I'm proud of what we accomplished as a team. And I still run into people today that still remember the '78 team when they find out, they hear my name or they know I'm from Annandale, and there's still people around here that remember that team.
Phil, are you still local? Are you somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm here. I live in South Riding and
Okay.
and work in Fairfax.
Great. Well, I hear you, Jim. So why don't you go next and wrap us up and tell us what you've been up to these last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, so similar. I took a road trip to go visit colleges and had a great time when I met Phil down at Wake Forest. So Phil kind of sat down and said, look, it's Mackovic. He is a lot like Hardage. And there was a connection there. They made an offer and I went to Wake Forest. I didn't play as much in college, but had a lot of fun on special teams and some of the things we talk about. Mark brought up Bruce Smith. There was an extra point that we had scored, and I went in, and next thing you know, I get blocked down on Bruce, and he stands up and says, you ever hit me in my knee again, I'm going to kill you. So I, ran off the field, and, William Perry, Lawrence Taylor. I mean, we played against some great teams and had some great memories. Some of the Annandale way for that for me was my senior year. I actually roomed with Dan Doherty, who started in front of me. The coaches really didn't want two guys in the same position. They liked us being rivals, but part of my way of dealing with that was to be on the sideline with Dan to kind of give him a heads up of what I was watching, if the ends were crashing or different things that we'd say. I'd have a towel for him and, try to play the support role and be on the special teams piece. I also, Greg and I talked about positions. Greg was the tailback. When Reggie came in, Reggie went to fullback and I went to tailback. I was 215 pounds and weighed more than the line did in high school. And then when Greg came back, Greg went to fullback and was probably one of the quickest. I mean, it just worked out of how things kind of came together. I think because of that team and what Phil said, a lot of us got some looks. I got hurt my senior year with a knee injury and missed 6 games. So certainly you learned very quickly that it's a business and you're only as good as your next play. When Al Groh came in, a little bit of a different program where the roles of the running back, and then I had foot surgery, a blowout shoulder, knee surgery. So, football started to take a toll on some of the things there as well. But, I think you hear from all of us, we loved the game as long as we could love it. And then there's a time where you got to hang up the cleats and let it go. I've been in sales and marketing, worked for a company called Dictaphone when I first got out of school. It was kind of the IBM Xerox sales training piece, which I loved. And then based on that success, was able to go to a startup company, Async, that got bought by Telcom USA and MCI, and I got the entrepreneurial bug. So eventually I got in print and radio and other things, and then started my own web company. Have been entrepreneurial with a couple different things that I've done over the years. Grant Hill was one of our first websites that we had ever done as a professional athlete. And it was Janet and Calvin Hill that sat in the meeting to say, we're choosing you. So a lot of fun of some of the things, Lillian Vernon, Wolf Trap, Ford's Theater. These were all the sites that we did. And back then people were wondering how the web was going to change the world. So fast forward to today, I still have that entrepreneurial bug and do some consulting, work with a lot of military nonprofits and other organizations. Augmented virtual reality and big data is, of course, the big thing now. Some of the memories that you just talk about, that one that came to mind when Ronnie was talking about the players and, my dad growing up and wouldn't have had college as an option if it weren't for football. So my dad's dying. We're coaching a youth football program. And I remember talking in front and the parents and trying to make the connections. And when I went down to see him, he was pretty weak and in a wheelchair, but had a chemo and some other things. And he says, son, I got to go to the bathroom. So I wheel him in and I stand him up in front of the urinal and I'm standing next to him. And all of a sudden he says, prettiest block you ever threw was Brian Weiss in 4th grade. And I went, what? And he goes, son, prettiest block you ever threw. It was a sweep around the end. You rolled him up, got up and hit another guy. And I go, Dad, what the hell made you think of that? And he goes, all I can tell you is it was then I knew you could play. So the point I made to those parents and the kids is enjoy it at whatever level your kids get to. And as long as it's fun, it's got to be the best thing ever, you know, and the camaraderie. I think what you hear from this group is, again, I was a transplant. I didn't know the Annandale way from any other way, other than my sophomore year. I started in a scrimmage, and next thing you know, Coach Sequels either got frustrated or something, but I was playing guard and tackle and linebacker and tight end, and I was second or third team on all of it. And literally remember sitting in a Ossian Park in tears with my dad at the end of the game. And he's going, what's the matter? And I said, I don't get this Annandale way. It's intense. I don't know if I can play here. And he said, you'll finish, but you know, maybe we'll make another decision. If it's not fun, we'll figure it out. And Hardage wrote at the end of my junior or sophomore year, you could be one of the top 22. And then when I went back and it was Cordell Gill as my running back coach, I think I was 4th on the depth chart. But Greg was a great support to be able to say, hang in there, you can do it. And, you know, we found a way to make that work. The saying for me that is one that I think these guys will all resonate with, that is kind of a life lesson. You know, I've shared with my kids over the years. I have a son and daughter. My wife is a Woodson graduate. So, you know, not to say that rivalry isn't good. Her brothers were big basketball players. So I always said, look, we loved your home field more than you guys did, because I think we played on it more than you did by the time the playoffs came around. So that said, you know, the life lesson piece of that is Bob Hardage always said, no matter how tired you get, don't drop your head. It's a sign of defeat. So that life lesson for me, my kids know it. Some of the people, when we'd go running and do things afterwards and we'd all be tired, you know, it was always take a knee, but don't drop your head. Don't let your opponent know that you're tired, because the minute they've got that edge on you, it could make a difference. You know, that for me, it kind of also ties into that nobody's got the right to ruin your day but you. So as a sales manager with other people, that I've always said is, if you give me 100%, I have 2 goals for you. If you're working for me, you're either going to move up in this company because of what you want to achieve, or you're going to decide maybe this isn't where you want to be, and come to me and let me know that. And if you're the worker that I think you are, I'll help you get wherever you need to go. I'll be a reference for you for life, and I want you to succeed in life. And I think that's because of the lessons that between our parents, between Bob Hardage, you know, one of the things we haven't mentioned here, the unique part of Annandale again is Ed Henry's the coach. Hardage played for Ed Henry. Dick Adams played for Bob Hardage. Coach Scott played for Coach Hardage and Dick Adams. So there's literally been 40 plus years, 50 years that this Annandale way has forever been our way. And I say that because when my son going through the school program with some things, the Sigholtz Award, there's some things that are a part of the program that you're blessed to be a part of that program, because it's a brotherhood of teammates that when we see each other, we don't shake our hands, we hug. It's, I've learned to say I have 3 wiser sisters, and that they're all big boned in my family over the years. Not having any brothers, these are my brothers. And that's the way that I look at that. You know, Phil and I have some guys with college that are guys we died on the field with. And we talk on a, you know, every 3 to 6 months just to keep in contact. And that's the beauty of what, you know, there are other sports. I'm a big fan because both my kids played lacrosse. And that's one of the best sports I've seen. I would have loved to have played lacrosse. I just didn't know anything about it. And this is that team piece that I try and instill that sometimes with the teams and the people that I know in life, because it's a special feeling when you get a call 5, 10 years later from someone that worked with you that said, will you be a reference? And, based on who those people are and their character, to me, that's what it's all about. So, don't drop your head. It's a sign of defeat, and, keep chugging every day, because it's a fight. It's a war out there, and just do what you need to do to be successful.
Well, that's great advice, Jim. And thanks for sharing that. I'm also curious, what are the names of your brother-in-laws that played at Woodson, basketball at Woodson?
Yeah, Tommy and Seamus McCombs.
Okay.
They were back with the Red Jenkins. Pete Holbert, I think, was a year or two older than them.
Okay.
Tommy Amaker was there, though, when they were a part of that program as well.
Yeah. I played against Tommy. I was here, but I did a couple podcasts with Red. You probably would enjoy them. Hey, look. So, Mike, first of all, I want to thank you for getting this great group of guys together. I mean, just a successful bunch of.
Yay, Mikey.
I could just tell. I could see why you guys won so many games, why you're national champs, just by listening to your stories and how you attribute all your success to your teammates and to your coaches. So,
well, I also feel bad that there are other guys that I just, there's so many other people who we could even talk about, whether it was Paul Francello, who blocked 2 kicks during the state game, Kevin Guthrie, who pretty much after college invented the concept of computers within pro football and such like that. There's a lot of very interesting characters on the team.
Yeah, but I feel like they're well represented, and you guys were very careful to give credit to the whole team and also to the whole community. So I think that will definitely come through. I wasn't trying to throw you under the bus there, Mike, but I want to thank you guys again for doing this. This is great. I looked up to your team. I didn't know you guys, but I definitely watched the team play and knew the tradition. So I really appreciate you jumping on this podcast and telling your stories. And hopefully, next time you have an Annandale football get together, you'll let like an old Robinson basketball player crash it. So
yeah, absolutely.
You're invited.
Someday we can talk about Annandale basketball too. Phil and I were on. And Mark was on there too.
I was only on there to foul Pete Holbert.
I think we all were.
Yeah.
well, that was fun. So fouling Pete Holbert had to be a good time.
Yeah.
Well,
Great.
anyway,
Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks.
Really enjoyable.
yeah, guys.
Thanks a
Well,
lot. Thanks a lot.
hopefully, let's keep in touch.
You
Thank
bet.
you so much.
Great to see everybody.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
good
Yeah.
stuff.
All right, Ron, we'll see you. Mike, thanks for putting this
Hey, it's
together.
good seeing all
Thanks,
you
Mike.
guys.
Yes, indeed.
Great seeing you guys. We'll see you.
Thanks.
See you.
Thanks to you guys.
Bye-bye.